Immich is my favourite self-hosted photos app, and version 3 was released yesterday on July 2nd. Feels like it took them forever to get to version 1, and here we are at version 3 already. Cool, I guess. Nice to see a release. And this release includes several breaking changes, and we'll go through those throughout the video. And there is a full migration guide linked in the description down below. Some of those changes have affected third-party apps like ImmichFrame. Mine's broken right now. But for their part, Immich says that for most users, updating shouldn't be a big deal. But of course, you're going to want to make sure you've got backups or a snapshot of your database before proceeding. So let's have a peek through the release notes. Now, first things first, this is the first Immich release to use the release candidate process. It's pretty cool if you want to take part in that. There's now an admin setting where you can change the release channel to include release candidate update notifications. Also, possibly the most important part of this update, you can now buy Immich merch and drape your kids, who, let's be honest, are probably responsible for most of the size increase in your photo library, in Immich merch and support the project. Obviously, mission critical infrastructure. Now, the actual highlights. Let's have a look at this stuff. Mobile non-destructive editing. Until now, mobile edits created new assets instead of editing the photos in place. With version 3, you can crop, rotate, and do basic edits without touching the original. It is still quite a basic implementation. I mean, it's nice to see, don't get me wrong. I can resize, I can rotate images, all non-destructively. But it's missing things like filters and color grading and a lot of the platform native editor controls that we're all used to in first-party apps. They're not there yet. The release notes also say that recoloring of photos, editing live photos, and local assets were removed for now. And they plan to bring some, I read into that, not all, they plan to bring some of those things back in a future release. So, nice to see non-destructive editing on mobile. Another feature that caught my eye was workflows, and these are in preview as of version 3. Workflows let you automate library actions by chaining things like triggers or filters and actions, and you can use their drag and drop builder or even write it in a JSON view if you're a masochist to create these workflows together. Now, the fact that you can do this in JSON tells me that these workflows are probably in time meant to be a shareable resource. Now, a workflow example that you might find useful, I mean, they're just automations, and people already hack a lot of this stuff together with scripts today. So, for example, you want to archive all the screenshots in your Immich library, or create an album with certain data, for example, or create something from a specific date or time with certain people together automatically, that kind of thing. So my hope for this, it's a really cool feature, but my hope for this in the long run is that this becomes some kind of like a gallery or an add-on store. For now, it's a preview, so I'd test it by all means, but no, it's a little rough around the edges. And in time, let's hope that we get a workflow store. A bit more boring, but very important background backup improvements on Android and iOS shipped as well. Android gets more reliable periodic backups, and iOS got optimizations around Apple's very short backgrounding window on iOS. There's also a new recently added page on the web and mobile, so you can browse by when files were added instead of when they were taken. Nice, I like that feature. Slideshows now also come to mobile, as does optical character recognition, or OCR. Feature parity with first-party apps is always nice to see, and OCR is super nice because it means you can highlight and copy text directly from a photo, and presumably I think that means you can search it as well. Nice. There's also a small on the surface but actually really pretty useful update when it comes to sharing photos as well. You can now choose the quality or the image size when sharing for mobile. So instead of sending full 25 megabyte raw files across Telegram to my parents, I can now just send a small thumbnail instead, which is all they really need. That's a nice little quality of life feature there. Now, from the admin's perspective, integrity checks are probably one of the more interesting features in this release. The maintenance page can now scan Immich's directories on disk and compare them with what's actually stored in the database. If it finds a deviation, Immich can report on untracked files, missing files, and even check some mismatches as well. Then there's also the addition of real-time video transcoding, so you don't need to pre-stage a bunch of your video transcodes. It will do it on the fly. Nice. Important caveat with that one is it's experimental and web first, and your server has to be powerful enough to keep up. So I would test video playback after upgrading, and there are already some early issues on GitHub I found around quick-sync systems trying AV1 where the GPU doesn't have AV1 encoding. So obviously there's some kinks to work out with that one, but it's cool to see nonetheless. Now, as is the case with seemingly every Immich major release, there are some breaking changes, so let's talk about those a little bit. The big database change in Immich 3 is that it's dropping support for PG vectors. Now, if you're on the standard Docker Compose setup with the Immich Postgres image or a fairly recent deployment, and you didn't explicitly set DB vector extension, you're probably already using VectorChord, and you can look at the image tag you have set in your Compose file. Mine, for example, literally says VectorChord in the tag. But if you started using Immich before version 1.133, customize Postgres in any way, or run a shared database, or use one of the many turnkey implementations of Immich, you need to verify that before you take the jump to version 3. It's always good practice before doing an upgrade like this to take a snapshot or back up the database first and make sure that your version of Postgres supports VectorChord. If the logs sit on reindexing clip indexes or face indexes for a long time, especially on big libraries, don't immediately kill the container. That is the database migrating its schema and doing some reindexing, and that can take a while, especially on big libraries. There are some API changes too. There's been a bunch of stuff removed, like old endpoints have been removed, shared link behavior has changed, album owner data has changed as well. There's also some changes to the config as well. libopus has now been renamed to opus. And OAuth insecure requests are now blocked by default. Metrics changed underscores to dots, so dashboards and Prometheus queries might also break as part of this update too. Wonder why they did that. That's a fun little gotcha, isn't it? Like suddenly my Prometheus queries are all broken. Unnecessary. Now, I did promise you in the intro to talk a little bit about third-party integrations and specifically ImmichFrame. ImmichFrame is one of these things that turns your tablet into a sort of digital photo frame based off of your Immich library. It's a really useful, really cool project, but ImmichFrame has a release date issue where Immich version 3 breaks ImmichFrame compatibility. So it's not like ImmichFrame is dead, it's just going to take a moment or two for them to upgrade to the new API schemas. Immich Kiosk also shipped a new version for Immich 3, but it explicitly says that version 0.4 and up only support Immich v3. So there's already an open issue where asset duration type mismatch can crash Immich Kiosk and spam the logs as well. So this is one of those releases where there's obviously been enough churn on the back end, the stuff you don't normally see. There's obviously been enough changes there that is causing some bumpiness with third-party tools. So maybe just wait a couple of weeks for those apps to update before you push ahead to version 3 on Immich. So my upgrade checklist, I mean, there's not really anything groundbreaking in my advice right here, but make sure you back up the database, snapshot the storage if you can, if you're using something like ZFS, take a snapshot of both the app data and the actual photos themselves, just in case. Take a backup of your end file, of your compose file before you make the changes or any custom config you might have. Confirm your database supports VectorChord. Inventory every integration that you're using at an API level, and then you can move to Immich version 3.01 or newer. And then after the upgrade, you can do things like testing mobile backup, login, search, etc., etc. Immich version 3 seems like a pretty good release, and it adds a lot of stuff people have wanted for a long time. But all of that stuff I've just talked about, that is the cost of self-hosting. You own the data. That's really good, but you also own the responsibility for looking after it and the outages and managing essentially a production service. So these upgrades, they come with a little bit of bumpiness sometimes, particularly around like schema migrations and stuff like that. And this stuff is all handled for you behind the scenes with iCloud Photos and Google Photos and that kind of thing. You aren't exposed to any of it because there are entire departments of companies doing this stuff. Well, you've outsourced that to yourself. You've insourced it, I suppose. That's the joy of self-hosting. Like that journey is part of the destination. So if you're new to all this, welcome. It's not always quite as bumpy as this, but Immich in particular, because it's looking after photos and photos are just irreplaceable, you've got to be super duper careful with them to make sure that an upgrade doesn't make things go sideways. Now, we're in the middle of Jellyfin, well, it's July now, isn't it? I'm still cranking away on Jellyfin June, although it will probably turn into Jellyfin July. It was a bigger project than I really realized when I started that. So make sure you subscribe to the channel to get more updates around Jellyfin July. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I've been Alex from KTZ Systems.